Hey guys, Buick update 33 here. A lot of progress has come in the past month or so relating to the throttle body fuel injection. So the first big thing that I really had to do was get the fuel plumbed for it, and that took a little bit of effort, but man, it came out nice. So this is a Tech fuel pressure regulator, and that runs back to the tank, which is now installed. So this is the pressure line, and that's the return line, and they both go up under the car. Back to the fuel tank, which again is now installed. Runs through a 10 micron filter, which you can see right there, and then that goes all the way back up and over the frame and back to the tank. And it has that nice Tech 300 something liter per hour, gallon per hour, I don't remember. Fuel tank, which is now installed. Would have been really cool if I could turn my flashlight on, but apparently I can't. But yeah, so this has all been wired. It's been wired into the fuel pump relay, and now it all turns on with the key. It'll do a nice little pump and prime, and I have all 60 psi fuel pressure that I need. But the cool part is that it's actually referenced to manifold pressure now, which runs into this splitter, which runs up and over to the throttle body. So this will adjust the fuel pressure that it's sending through this line up to the throttle body based on the manifold pressure, and it'll compensate once I get into boost so that the throttle body doesn't freak out. So now that all that's done, the car actually runs. It runs on the runs with the sniper, and I gotta say it's been a very easy process. I had initially just done this with a regular old HEI, so timing control was not enabled, but it is basically just going through the wizard, putting the stuff in, or putting the info in on what the engine is and the type of cam and all this other stuff, and the types of AFRs, whatever I was looking for. It was super easy to install. The fuel pump sounds pretty gnarly when you turn it on. So once I hit the key, it'll turn the fuel pump on and then flash a little bit of gas in the throttle body for a fuel prime. And it starts right up every time. It's really excellent. So other than that, now that the fuel tank and lines were done, let's see, got a handful of other things done. So this is a catch can, or I guess a breather can technically. So if you remember, I had the two valve cover hats on it, and because it is a forged piston engine, the seal when the engine is cold is not quite that great. So because of that, a lot of oil gets passed, a lot of crankcase pressure builds up, and it'll blow some of the oil fumes out through the breathers, which is typically fine. You don't typically see that a lot with cast pistons, but it is particularly bad with forged ones, and because of that, it was soaking through the hats, and after, I don't know, maybe an hour of engine running, the foam inside of the hats would get saturated with oil, and then it would start to kind of slowly run over the valve cover, which I was really getting tired of. So because of that, I bought this Summit breather can setup, and it was actually super easy to install. But basically it'll just run the crankcase pressure through into this can and then vent to atmosphere, and because of that, it'll catch any oil vapors and oil condensation inside the can, so I can just empty that out periodically and not have oil all over my engine, which is pretty great. Let's see, some other tidying up stuff. I did finally get the underside of the car with the floor pans that I welded in seam sealed. I also got some plugs for the floor pans, and also got those seam sealed, and did a few patches on the transmission hump. So now when I drive through puddles, I don't have to worry about getting my feet wet, which is always a plus. Let's see, headlights and grille. I did install the grill, which, it was always a big concern I had never actually, I think, had the grill on this car since I installed the intercooler setup, because there was always this concern about where it was going to go through the rad support and being able to attach the two mounting points for it. But after a little bit of massaging with this hole and getting these painted, I finally am able to get the grill on and in place, and it actually does look like a normal car now. The other part is I got the headlights in, so that was the other big piece, is that I wasn't ever able to get this headlight in because I used to use a wider turn into this high beam headlight hole. So I'm pretty ecstatic that now I can have it basically stock appearing. One thing you might notice is I only have these two headlights in. So when I installed the adjuster nuts, these white nuts right here, I installed them backwards. And there's one thing I can say about OPG is they do make some pretty quality products, and they were too tight to actually save and actually get back out in order so I could install them the correct way. And because of that, I had to destroy 4 of them to get them out. So these are the other 4. I'm still waiting on some replacements to the other side. But other than that, they were pretty, it was a pretty painless, quick install, and I'm very happy to have my headlights back. Let's see. So one other thing is now that I have my sniper installed running, one of the big issues that I faced was I couldn't tell if the mechanical gauge that I had for break-in was not quite reading right, and I was a bit concerned because when I would drive around, my coolant temperature sensor would show like 210, 220. Sometimes when I turned it off at 220, it would eke up to 230 degrees, which is kind of concerning, obviously. And one thing I did notice is that the coolant temperature sensor, which installs right here and just plugs into the harness, the one that came with the sniper was actually incredibly incorrect, which was very concerning. So one of the ways that I tested that was I waited until everything was cool, and then I would compare the manifold air temp on the handheld to the coolant temp sensor readings, and the manifold air temp would read 15 degrees cooler than the coolant temp when it's been sitting for, a day or two. So because of that, that kind of led me to believe that the coolant temperature sensor was reading way off, and it just wasn't reading right. So some of the guys at the Holley Sniper Forum were kind enough to have left some very clever information. The Holley Sniper CTS sensor is like $50 or something like that, but you can just buy, I think, some Delphi or AC Delco coolant temperature sensors, which have the exact same plug, work the exact same way, but actually read accurately, for like $10 on Amazon. So I swapped one of those out and got my temperature readings correct, and it was still reading pretty darn hot. I would still, get up to 205, 210, and then it would just kind of stay around there, 205 to 215 usually. And it was still very hot, and I just could not, it's been a long time since I've had this car running regularly, so I couldn't quite remember if that was correct. But one thing I did seem to remember is I replaced the thermostat when I was rebuilding the engine, and wouldn't you know it, apparently the stock temperature for the thermostat is 195, and I'd always remembered the engine running around 185 to 190 maybe, and that just didn't seem right. So it turns out that the stock recommended replacement, which is the one I bought when I was rebuilding the engine, has a thermostat setting for 195, and that's why I was seeing 205, 210, 200, 205 as the coolant would circulate. So after researching, they also had an alternate 180 degree thermostat that you can also buy. So after spending 5 minutes researching that, I just bought a different thermostat, swapped that in, and now I'm sitting back perfectly when the engine is up to temp, keeping it at 185 to 190, and everything works great now. So while I did that, I obviously had to drain all the coolant in order to replace that, and I just went ahead and took that opportunity to wash out the radiator, wash out the block, because it turns out there was a bunch of rusty crap in there from the plain water that I had used during engine break-in, which I would have suspected accumulated, and then just kind of rusted a little bit on the inside while it was sitting there for a few months. Let's see. One other cool thing with the Super Sniper, I guess any sniper really, is that you can plug it directly into the computer via USB if you disconnect the handheld. And one thing you can do is you can take the handheld pigtail and you can buy a splitter such that you can plug in the sniper handheld as well as a sniper USB cable that comes with the kit. And because of that, now it's super sweet because I can plug in the handheld and be able to see and read stuff off that, but I can also have a USB to this to the USB-C adapter, and I can plug it directly into my laptop. And I had mostly done that just for fun, but the cool part and the reason why I have it installed now is because I also just got done installing timing control. So timing control is something that I always kind of thought was relatively expensive. The way that Holley Sniper works it out so that you can, so the way that they want you to install it is they want you to buy a separate distributor, and then a separate, I think it's a computer or something, and then a separate coil for that particular distributor. And the thing is that I either didn't quite understand or they don't advertise terribly well is that you can do this with a lot of magnetic pickup distributors just out of the box by just changing a handful of things. So I think it was Turbo Camaro 69 on YouTube had a similar conversion, and I just went ahead and gave it my best shot and, you know, gave it the old college try, and it worked out just beautifully. It was super easy. It probably took like an hour on a weekend to get it installed. But basically all you end up needing to do is inside of this distributor, you have your wiring harness, which comes out right here. And then you have that wiring harness plug into a simple circuit, which looks like this. So inside of this, there is this contact on the wiring harness module, which actually triggers the coil. So, and then there are these two, which are the magnetic pickups. So what you can do is you can actually reroute the two magnetic pickups outside of the distributor housing and then plug that into the sniper harness, which it would be right here. And you can see I had this pigtail plugged into the sniper harness right here. And then this is a magnetic pickup such that the sniper will know the position of the, I guess, cam position, crank position, sensor, I don't know. But that will tell the, the computer where the engine is in terms of timing. And then all you need is some way to trigger this piece, this particular lead, which tells the coil to fire off through this pigtail. So this is one of the cheapest parts in the whole setup that Holley recommends. But basically all you need to do is install this piece, which just takes 3 leads, and it's relatively straightforward. It's just a ground, a pink switched 12 volt, and then a white wire. And this white wire comes from the 10-pin harness that comes from the sniper. So that is right here, and this is actually the only wire I'm using off of this harness. But this white wire plugs into the back of the coil driver module, the Holley Sniper coil driver module, and then there's just one gray wire that comes out of the coil driver module. So this coil driver module will actually replicate what that little 4-pin HEI module does and tells it when to trigger the spark. Then once you do that, this gray wire will go back into the distributor, into that coil driver pin via this wire, and then that will spark off, and that will trigger the spark. And from there, once you have all that wired up and phased appropriately, then you can enable the magnetic pickup HEI, or I'm sorry, the magnetic pickup timing control on your Holley Sniper, and my God, it works so well. I had had issues with this type of setup for a long time, where I'd get into it and then it would stumble a bit unless I kind of like rolled into it. And setting essentially an equivalent mechanical advance that I can adjust on the Holley Sniper software just completely eliminated that. I can also do timing retard based on boost level, so that I can run and get into boost safely and not have to have some $700 MSD box, which just, it fixed so many problems. It runs so well. It starts right up, and then I can play with it as I need to and pull and add timing. So now that all of that is done and it runs so well, the only other thing I really have to do is to just break the engine in and then start tuning. And one of the things that I did in an attempt to start tuning after making this base map was to create a pair of det cans so I could listen for detonation when I'm driving around. And the way that I did this is I put in this banjo fitting bolted to the block, and I did the same thing on the other side right there. And these run into two tubes, which runs into a T, which runs into this tube, which runs into the car. And basically all it connects to is a pair of sound isolating earmuffs with a big hose running into it. And this works relatively well. The only issue that I'm currently facing is that the engine is so loud. And while I do have a muffler, I'm having a tough time finding a shop that will do 3-inch exhaust, but I do have a straight through Borla muffler that I'm hoping to get installed soon. But yeah, the engine is so loud. I can hear the engine, and I hear what I'm supposed to hear, and I hear normal engine operation. But once I give it gas, when I should actually be concerned with listening for detonation, the turbo and the exhaust are so loud that I'm having a real issue being able to actually listen for the things I'm supposed to be listening for. So because of that, I'm gonna have to find some way to, I don't know, put a microphone on it and amplify it so that I can turn it up and actually listen for it, or just try again once I get the exhaust installed. So hopefully I don't have to make my own exhaust, but hopefully there's a shop around here that'll do it for me. But other than that, my God, it runs great. Keeps it at 185 degrees, 195 degrees. The cooling system works great. The intercooler is absolutely massive and keeps the inlet air temps directly at ambient. Throttle response is great. Cruising is great. And man, it gets into I've been keeping it out of boost since I'm still breaking it in for the most part. Sometimes I see 1, 2, 3 PSI, but man, it gets into boost quick, and the throttle response is just great. So everything's been going great. Hopefully I can get it a little quieter so I can do a little bit more tuning. Hopefully not piss off the neighbors, drive it around a little bit more, get it broken in, and then start tuning for 5, 10, maybe 15 PSI. We'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching, guys.